Hello everyone and welcome. We're going to be doing a review of motivational interviewing as it relates to SBIRT. My name's Cheryl Martin and I'm a motivational interviewing network trainer. So now I am speaking from my heart about something that I believe in strongly. Motivational interviewing is viewed as part of what we do in SBIRT with brief intervention. I believe motivational interviewing is what we do with people from the moment we sit with them, how we engage them, how we help them feel safe and trust us, how we help raise the chances that they will consider some change for themselves in their life that they want to do, and that we can help move them in that direction. So motivational interviewing is really important around engaging people and having conversations where we have to share information and when we really are looking to have somebody make a change. What is it called? It's an evocative conversation. Evocative means that I'm pulling out from you, listening and getting from you why these things are important to you, what you think about your drinking, what you think would be helpful, how you think you might want to go forward. Conversation about change between the clinician and the person being served. So as you can hear, there's going to be a lot of listening, and I'm really going to value the expertise of the person in front of me. I come as a clinician with expertise about motivational interviewing, perhaps about substance use disorders, but the person in front of me will always be the expert about themselves and their own behaviors and what they do. It's collaborative. And collaborative means that there is neither one of us sitting with more power than the other. This is shared power. This is a partnership. My expertise matters, your expertise about yourself matters. Neither has more merit than the other. And this is really important because we as healthcare providers come in with a natural kind of power in the relationship because of what we do. So we have to work a little harder to be able to hear the voice of the person we're serving and how important stuff they can bring to us that we need to know. And that's really what increases somebody's motivation to change, is hearing themselves talk about what they want to do, us finding a way to get them to have that conversation with us. And motivational interviewing really understands the ambivalence of change, that it's an absolutely normal part for every human being. Any behavior we're engaging in at all has a purpose. That's why we're doing it. And on the other side of that, there's many times reasons why we would rather not engage in that behavior. So you can see the ambivalence. We have two sides. One side that wants to stay the same and one side that wants to change. This is not pathological. This is normal human behavior, and this is really where decision making and learning how to move folks to hear themselves talk about why they want to change versus why they don't want to change. In MI, we expect the person to be doing most of the talking, 80% of the talking actually. And the reason we do that is because we know that there's great power in them hearing themselves say things out loud to us. Their values really matter too. So if I'm going into this with an idea that I need to make this person more healthy because it's a value for them to be drinking or not drinking or drinking within less risky limits, that kind of thing, if that's my value to make that happen, which is fine, I'm probably not going to make a whole lot happen going at it like that, because we have to figure out what value they have that would make it important to them. So it may be that they really have great love of their children and want to be a great parent, and the drinking's been getting in the way of that. There's the value. There's the thing that will make a difference, rather than perhaps health even. So I want you to think about changes that you've been making in your own life or want to make, or things you'd like to do different. Do you always have two sides? Think about those New Year's resolutions, a side that wants to do it, a side that doesn't, pulling you back and forth with that. I think that helps us to understand what it feels like for anybody who's in these positions. So what motivational interviewing is not is a way of tricking people into doing what they don't want to do. This is not manipulative. It is a skill that we have because we know that it's difficult for any of us to get out of that forest of ambivalence we have. I want to do it, I don't want to do it. And the skill of MI is to help pull them out of that with their information, not ours. So we figure out how to get that information from them. Key points about MI that are really important to know. We are a guide in MI. There's 3 ways we can work with people. We can be directive and just tell them. I want you to think about that. Just because you tell people what to do, have you noticed that they always do it? Often not. And sometimes when we just tell people what to do, they actually push back deeper into the behavior we were hoping they would stop. If you think about yourself and when people tell you what to do, what's the reaction you have? Often it's, well, that's an idea, but that won't work for me because. And that's exactly what we're trying to move away from. So that's directive style. Following is that you just listen to people and you have no direction, you have no desire to make the conversation move in any way, and that certainly is not MI either. MI is a gentle guiding. We know that there's certain ways to speak with people. Number 1, that I really want to engage you. I want you to feel safe and trust my relationship with you. And number 2, that I know that there's certain things about change talk that I want to build on. So I'm always listening for what it is that would make you personally want to move to a different place in your behavior, because it is that change talk you give me that will really make the difference. And I want to stay there rather than sit and kind of listen to all the reasons why you don't want to. It is a communication style and a way of being with people. There is a spirit to it, and that's essential to its effectiveness, that people feel that they can trust us, that they feel safe, that they really feel like we care. They sense that it matters to us, not to the point that we want to make them do something, because that steps over the line, but to the point that they recognize we do want the best for them. Clinician will focus on change talk and minimize sustained talk. So sustained talk is, I'm so anxious I just need to drink. Sustained talk. Change talk is, boy, I don't know, it's starting to make me feel bad. Every morning I wake up, I just don't feel like getting going. It's really hard to get going. But you know, I had great fun the night before. Great fun the night before is sustained talk, why I want to keep doing this. Having difficulty getting going in the morning is change talk. So I might say to them, there's times when alcohol's allowed you to have a good time, and on the other hand, you're feeling like it's just really interfering with your life, your work, your school, and you want to do something about that. And that would be a double-sided, complex reflection that I would respond to that person with. So what am I doing? I'm recognizing their sustained talk, the fun the night before, but I'm also leaving them with their change talk. So they know I heard them, and they know that I care about them and see where they would like to go in their change. MI can be as brief or as long as it needs to be. I've had 5-minute conversations on the phone where I've used this, well, I think I use it most of the time, so it would be hard for me not to, but 5-minute conversations on the phone where I've really engaged the person and we've moved along towards a change, and sometimes it requires 3 or 4 or 5 visits, having the conversations where we're moving towards a change somebody would want to make. So what's the spirit of MI that I talked about? It's collaboration, partnership. It's evocation, pulling out from the other person what they think about it. It's acceptance. I think this is huge, and I'll just quickly say what that is. It means I see absolute worth in that person in front of me. They do not have to be the way I want them to be. They are fine as they are. They have to feel that I really care about them as a human being and accept them. Accurate empathy about how they're feeling. Understanding some of the things I mentioned earlier to you about adverse childhood experiences when we talked about SBIRT. understand that people carry some of this pain and suffering, and our ability to understand the complexity of all the behaviors we engage in, and there's lots of reasons why we do what we do, and to honor that and recognize the things that have happened to people is really important with this. Respecting their autonomy. After all, no one has to do what we tell them. Everyone has autonomy. And so you can understand from that how important it is to see what they want to do and to have it so that they are feeling empowered to use their autonomy towards their own wellness, to activate them towards that, and to respect them, their self-worth. So I use affirmations a lot. This was really scary for you, but you came anyway. Here you are. You were able to change your drinking when everyone around you was still drinking. Whatever it is, I'm looking for an affirmation to give to people, and that compassion that you generally care. And I think we've talked enough about that. It's a real caring that people can feel. So our job to work with people is not to fix them or make them right, because if you have that unconditional positive regard for somebody, they're right as they can be right now in front of you. But how do you feel when people give you unsolicited advice? So when people tell you what to do, how do you feel? And I'd like you to go there and sense that feeling about it. Because really, when we're trying to help another person, all we can bring is our own worldview, which is very narrow. I have only my own experience I've had through my childhood, through my adulthood, through my work. I only know that from my position that I am as a white, older adult female who was born in Canada, spent a number of years here in the US. That's the only worldview I can bring. You can see how valuable and important it is to hear the worldview of the person in front of you. You can also see that from my narrow worldview, I can't possibly know what's right for another person and how they ought to do it. They will bring their own. So we need to listen to them. We need to know their values, their goals, their worldview, and then activate and restore their power, because often people aren't changing because they feel helpless or hopeless. And there's often resources or just a relational thing that we can give people to help them feel like they can make a difference. So the basic skills of MI are ORS. Open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. So open-ended questions are, and by the way, closed questions can be used as well. The important thing about questions is that you're seeking change talk versus sustained talk. So I'll give the example I give all the time when somebody's had a relapse. If a person's had a relapse and I ask you, what made you relapse? I'm eliciting all your sustained talk. All the reasons why you felt it necessary to have that drink the other day or to use that drug the other day. That would be counter to a motivational interviewing approach, because now you're having them convince themselves again that they needed to use that. Instead, I'd say to them, supposing you didn't want that lapse to happen, what would it have taken for you not to use? And now everything they tell me would be all the things they'd have had to do to not have that use happen. And that's the kind of questions we would want to use in motivational interviewing, moving them towards thinking about what it would take to change. Affirmations I've talked about, they're about their strengths and their successes. You really care about your family would be a good example of that. Reflections, they can be both simple and complex. I would really encourage people to make this particular way of being with people, not just when you're doing SBIRT, but in any healthcare you're doing, learning how to do complex, more interesting reflections is really, really helpful. for you to learn who you're sitting with. People become more open. They'll share information with you. They understand you really hear them. You can also share some expertise in that way too, in a way that isn't imposing or telling people what to do. So complex reflections include the double-sided, like I gave you earlier. Amplified, you've decided to smoke the rest of your life. That's an amplified reflection. They may have said, I don't want to talk about my smoking, I'm not going to quit smoking. You've decided to smoke the rest of your life. The usual response from people, providing you've said that in a very objective and non-judgmental way like I just did, is that, geez, I didn't say the rest of my life. Well, what would make you want to stop then? Not the rest, if it's not the rest of your life. And people will start to talk about why it won't be the rest of their life. What kind of talk is that? Change talk, about why they might consider changing sometime. Metaphors are very useful. It feels like you got a whole bunch of crows pecking away at you. Helps people feel what you're saying to them. And then things about their affect. You're feeling really frustrated today is a good reflection, depending on where people are. So I'm not going to spend any time with summaries. With change talk, this is where we want to go up the hill with people. This is folks that are in pre-contemplation and contemplation, and we're trying to get the information that we need for them to start to think about making this change. So it's preparatory. Desire change talk sounds like, I wish I felt better in the mornings. There is your change talk. That's the piece you're going to take and move forward with as your change talk. Ability is, I could probably use a cab when I've been drinking. So you reflect using that. There's their change talk. And you can see the others there. So we think about desire, ability, reasons, and need. Desire is very kind of fluffy, I'll call it. It's kind of that, I really just like to do that. But it doesn't have a whole lot of power, as you can feel it. Ability really is important, because people may have all the important reasons to change, all the things they can think of. And yet, if they don't believe they have the skill to do it or the resources to do it, they're probably not going to go forward with a commitment. So ability is a big area that we want to understand. How confident are they? How competent do they feel? Reasons are very cognitive, right? Those are the things that these are the reasons. I would save money. Very tangible, very cognitive. And need is something deep in our emotions. When we say, I need to do something or I might lose my job, there is a huge emotional aspect to that. So change talk, heading down the hill. Once we've elicited as much of this going up the hill talk with desire, ability, reasons, and need, then we want to start talking about the mobilizing piece of it. Let's do something with this. So this is in the planning and action stage. Sometimes in our conversations, in fact many times, we don't get to this heading down the hill piece in just one conversation. People will spend time in that going up the hill and really start to have that play around in their head now that they've heard themselves say it. And out of that, they may even make that change without having the plan. But this stuff does play and often has an impact with people when we've had that good conversation about their DARN, D-A-R-N. So change talk heading down the hill. That's the mobilizing thing. Commitment, activation, taking steps. Commitment is, I'm not going to smoke in the house or the car. It may not be 100% commitment you're looking for, but that is a commitment to make a behavior change, and it is a great start. Activating is, I plan to buy nicotine patches tomorrow. So they've got a plan. They're activated to do something. And taking steps is, I've actually done something. I got rid of all the alcohol yesterday. I bought a gym membership yesterday. I've looked at various treatment agencies that are available, those kinds of things, that they've actually taken steps and done something. So let's just quickly go back to sustained talk. Sustained talk happens when the person is telling us why they shouldn't or can't change. And again, when we use a directive style, when our mindset is to fix this person and make them right, we often unintentionally get all kinds of sustained talk back from people. It's really important to understand this. In fact, the best person to teach you whether you're being helpful in the conversation towards change or pushing it back is the person in front of you. If you hear them giving you a lot of sustained talk, change what you're doing. Move it to those places I talked about, where we're listening for some change and seeking to find some direction outside of the behavior that they're engaging in. Your mission, if you decide to accept it, is to learn to soften this sustained talk and strengthen the change talk. So we don't want to elicit sustained talk. How do we minimize it? With reflections that we use. Your drinking's not a concern for you right now. It would be something I do so I don't create a place where they want to convince me that their drinking isn't a problem. You see, by doing that, by accepting and just reflecting back what they've told me about their drinking when they are saying it's not a problem, by doing that, I stop that conversation of them continually trying to convince me that it's not a problem. They know I heard them. By reframing, it would be difficult for you to stop drinking because it reduces your anxiety and it's an important part of your social life. So that's basically recognizing what it is that's in the way for them, that they really have these issues that are very important to them, reducing their anxiety, their social life, and that's something that they're concerned about. And by emphasizing their autonomy. Ultimately, the decision lies in your hands. And so consistently going back to, it's up to you, it's in your hands, it's your choice, only you can make that decision. Really builds people's autonomy so they start to feel empowered. When people feel empowered, they're more likely to try something new. So let's talk a little bit about discord. We used to actually, sustained talk and discord used to be called resistance in motivational interviewing in the early days. And we've come to recognize that people can only be resistant in the face of things that we do as clinicians. So if we try to make them change or tell them how to change, we'll get sustained talk. Or we'll get this other thing, discord. It means that we have not set up a relationship where they trust us. And so we really want to work hard to fix that relationship, to fix the rift in the relationship. If somebody's starting to feel angry, or you're starting to sense they're angry, or they just don't want to talk to you anymore, there's some kind of pushback, consider what you're doing and think if there's something else you could do to help them feel safer and to feel more trusting and to be willing to have a conversation with you. So safety, trust, powerlessness, a very big issue, especially for people with histories of early childhood trauma. Because what's the one thing a child doesn't have in a relationship with their people around them when they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old? Is power. And when we set up a dynamic where they feel powerless with us in the conversation, that often gets triggered and they become re-traumatized. So we really want to avoid doing that with people. And they just may not feel heard. They may think that you just keep going back to what you want and you're not hearing what they're telling you about their own experience. It is certainly the signal to change our own behavior. So you feel forced to come here and want me to know that you will make the decision about what comes next. I agree. And that's a way to defuse the discord that's happening. Our responses will either escalate it or reduce it. And so we can do something about it. So there's 4 processes of MI that we know are hugely important. Engaging the person, finding a focus that both that person and you agree on, evoking from them everything you can about their view of this situation, what matters to them, their change talk, what their feelings, that we can be able to give those reflections back about what we hear, how confident they are, and planning. So let's think about how we can avoid some of the traps that happen. with MI. And just going back to those processes, by the way, that I talked about, engaging, focusing, evoking and planning. Frequently in healthcare, what happens when I come into a visit is I may barely get engaged. In other words, we really don't get that sense that there's a caring, compassionate relationship going on, and somebody is working on the plan for me of what's going to happen. And we know that when real change happens, those other processes are important, that the engagement is complete, that we really do engage the person in front of us, just as they are, without all this change that we're headed towards. That we do find a focus that they care about, and that they have clearly been able to tell us why they care about it, what are their values, their worldview, and that we spend a lot of time evoking from them. Then it's time for the plan, because now we have everything we need for that plan to work. And this can be done in a very short period of time. So let's think about the traps, though, that we can avoid. Question and answer trap is a big problem. When we ask a lot of close-ended questions to people and they just give answers, we really are not engaging them, number one. And it really kind of deactivates them. They become very passive. They aren't taking responsibility for their own health. They're just answering all the questions that you're asking. And so finding a way to do that so that people feel heard and don't feel inundated with questions. So more reflections would be really helpful with that. A premature focus where you're already talking about planning and they've barely agreed with you that the focus you've got is the one that they're interested in, that can really cause a lot of harm. So we really want to be sure that we are where that person is. Are they in pre-contemplation? Are they in contemplation? Are they in action? Because we need to be at that same place that they are. We don't want to be way up here when they're way back here. Or the other way around. If they are already in action stage, bringing them back into all of the information about their use and all the bad things it causes is probably just as destructive. In fact, we know that to be the case because we're bringing them back into all the sustained stuff and the pain. Taking sides by identifying the problem and directing the solution is a trap. So we want to stay neutral in these conversations. The caring, we want them to know. The compassion we have, we want them to feel, because that's relational. But when it comes to their decision about their behaviors, we stay in a neutral position about that. We give very clear information. The CDC recommends X, Y, and Z. What do you make of that? Or the NIAAA says less risky drinking is X, Y, and Z. What do you make of that? We can give that information, but we're giving it still in that neutral way. Or taking on the expert role, because again, as I mentioned before, the expert is the person sitting in front of us. They are the expert about themselves and their drinking. They are the expert about themselves and their diabetes. They are the expert who is living with what it is, and they know what they care about. So, MI is not easy. To become proficient, we benefit from practice, from observation and feedback, and we can do that for each other. The person in front of us is giving us some of that. If our relationship feels stable and that there's this caring, there's this understanding that there's trust and safety, and if we are hearing from people change talk and we're able to elicit that and we feel like we're reflecting, we know that we're doing a fair job at this motivational interviewing thing and really helping to support that person's desire to make change and their opportunity to make change. So I leave this with you. To enjoy and practice in the work you do. I will share one other thing about MI. This approach, this way of being, helps us to be more satisfied with the work that we do. If we spend a lot of time saying, well, I keep telling them to do that, and they're so non-compliant, and they're so non-adherent, and they don't do what I tell them, our job becomes really not much of a pleasure. And really, it does negate what we talk about all the time in healthcare, is that we want to be person-centered, that the person has a right to their own decisions, and that we can be part of that journey or that dance with them in their quest for wellness. Thank you very much.